Hello, everybody. So today I want to talk a little bit about our fifth frequently asked question, and that is, what is an action item? We're just going to talk about these things that we put up. We certainly do them on our Facebook group, and we are putting them on our website to prompt people to reach out to specific legislators about the issue of fair funding. We're going to talk about why that's important, and we're going to talk about how to do it. So, first things first, the reason we are reaching out to legislators is because if we look at this chart, we can see that we need just 18 votes in the House and 6 votes in the Senate in order to get fair funding legislation passed, because the other votes are already there. We need to sway about 18 folks in the House and 6 in the Senate. And we think that that's possible, and this chart shows why. So depending on how you talk about the fair funding issue, some people will say, oh, but more school districts are benefiting from the inequity, so it's going to be too hard to get it passed. And that is true. Currently, more school districts are getting more than their fair share. Doesn't mean that they're getting they're swimming in cash or anything, but they're getting more than their fair share according to the formula than school districts who are being shortchanged. However, when you look at it in terms of students, you can see that in that chart, or the column second to the left, you can see that more students are being shortchanged. It's because the larger districts tend to be the ones that are not getting their fair share. And really what I'd want to focus in on is the fact that in the Senate and the House, more legislators, their overall districts are being shortchanged than are currently benefiting. And it's important to realize that with Governor Wolf's proposal, he's not looking to take money away from anybody. He's actually set it up in a way that allows no district to lose money. It just will bring the other districts up to the equity level of this current school year. So we think it's possible to get the votes to support fair funding legislation. It's also difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but we think it's possible, and we think that something that will help is having folks from all around the state and in all different positions and roles be reaching out to their legislators. So here's what we're doing. Here's the action item. You're calling, you're emailing, or alternatively, you could tweet, or you could send snail mail if you wanted to, or reach out in any other way that you can think of, certain legislators. And we have focused on the folks who we think are would make sense for them to be a yes vote for fair funding. And so that's who we will be pushing out there, as well as some of the leaders who just need to be hearing from people that this really matters, and folks who have the ability in chairmanship positions, that sort of thing, the ability to bring this up, have a fair funding hearing, for example. So we're focusing on the folks that we're focusing on for a reason. And we try to give you the information. I'm going to jump over here. On our website, we have a Join the Fight page. If you go to pafairfunding.org and click Join the Fight, you'll see links to go find your legislator right here. And you'll see sample letters that can be used if you're sending an email. It'll prompt you. It'll allow you to craft your own email, but with those prompts to help you kind of feel like you got a sense of what you're doing and make sure you cover the bases there. And so that resource is there to help with the action items. Okay, so when you call, let's assume you're calling, because in an email this will be worked in as well. But when you call, give your name, your school district, and your role. If you talk to a real person, they'll probably ask you your name and where you're from, but you can do that right off the bat. Give your name, your school district, your role. And when I say role, I mean parent, teacher, school board member, taxpayer, and make sure, this is really important to understand. If you're a taxpayer, or even if you're not a taxpayer, maybe you're a renter and you don't have any kids in the school district anymore, your voice, believe it or not, might be one of the most important voices, because people are used to people like a school board member calling. The legislators are used to that. They're less used to people who are taxpayers calling, and parents, public school parents calling, because I don't know why, but they have indicated those folks don't tend to call unless something really big is happening. They just don't regularly get those calls. So if they're getting calls from you and you're a taxpayer, you are just a community member who's concerned about this issue, that will probably help them to know this is really important. If people are talking about this who are not the school board members. They're not the superintendents or the typical folks that they hear from. Then they know something's big. So you call, you give that information, and you're just saying, I'm calling to ask the legislator, whoever they are, to support fair funding because, and this is where we are going to do a little bit of education and a little bit of advocacy, but it's very simple. You're going to educate them with some real basic facts and experience. So something like this: most PA students are receiving less than their fair share, and students of color are particularly disproportionately harmed. That's a fact. That's not up for debate. You're just sharing the information. And don't assume legislators are going to know all of this. Legislators have to cover a lot of ground in terms of the things they vote for. And unless they're involved in education legislation, they might have very little knowledge of this issue. They might have way less than you would think they would have. So share your basic information and then tell your story. Okay. And I see I messed up the numbers there. I'm just going to leave them. You're just going to tell them this has negative effects on my community, and you're going to give some examples. And this is the most important part as far as I'm concerned. People think, I don't have much of a story. Like you don't have some big thing you're thinking of off the top of your head, but everybody has a story. You do have a story. You can talk about the lack of opportunity for your child, something that maybe they know that their neighbors have and they don't have. Our Pottstown's high school only has 6 AP courses. The districts surrounding us have at least double that. Some of them have 3 or 4 or 5 times that. And that's a story. Don't minimize the fact that your story is simple. Don't tell yourself you don't have a story. You do. You can talk about how high your taxes are, because that's an issue that's very closely linked to that. The districts that are underfunded, receiving less than their fair share, tend to have higher taxes. And that's a fact. You can talk about safety. Buildings, some school districts really struggle to even just have basic safe buildings for kids. So you could talk about concern with asbestos or mold or other issues that children in your district are experiencing. And if you know that kids are getting the message of inferiority because they know that their neighbors get more, and they don't understand why don't we have that? Like, why are we less important? If there's things that your kids have said or that you've heard kids in the community said, messages that they maybe internalized, that's especially powerful, because it demonstrates how harmful the system is beyond just specifics. You get into the narrative, and really the way that the legislature is treating schools is that some are less important than others. And so to share that as a story is powerful. Truly, it's more powerful than the facts. The facts are needed, but stories are so powerful. Don't feel like my story isn't good enough. Just share what it is. Share your story. Okay. And then the advocacy piece, you're going to say the governor's budget and fair funding legislation, they address this. So please support one of these solutions. And just, you can be insistent, always be polite, but you can be insistent and, full of conviction. Our kids cannot wait any longer. Like, they cannot wait. You can even point out the fact that if you're a parent like me, when I have grandkids, if this keeps going along the way it's going, they will still, if they live in Pottstown, still be in an underfunded district. My grandkids and possibly even great grandkids, I'm not sure how long it would ever take to approach equity, because the system is perpetually inequitable the way that it's set up right now. And just to talk about that and to kind of insist, because there's times legislators will say, well, it's just not feasible right now. It's not politically feasible. It's always, it's always somebody else's fault too. But the reality is, if enough legislators decide I need to do something, then it will happen. And so we can ask them, like, will you be one of the brave ones to stand up and say, this can't go on any longer? And so when you call, you're almost certainly going to be talking to a staffer, unless the legislator calls you back, which will happen occasionally and is really great. But when you're talking to that staffer, the message is for the legislator. So just say it as if it is. You don't get bogged down in the fact that you'll probably speak to a staffer or be leaving a message. Just say your truth, and that's really what is most important. So bottom line, advocacy works. It really, really, really does. We've seen in the past that when lawmakers hear from people and they get meetings, which we will be having a webinar soon on how to meet with your legislator, it really matters. Legislators will say yes to things that they were previously ignoring. And there is some real strength in numbers. So the more people we have doing these action items, the more people we have reaching out and saying, I'm just gonna call. I feel insecure about it or uncomfortable, or I'll email instead. Whatever you're gonna do, please know that it matters. Like, if this is something that a lot of people do, it seriously, seriously ups our chances of major fair funding legislation happening. So that is it for today. Please reach out if you have any questions or if I missed anything. We try to put a lot of good resources out there, but if there's anything that you're like, you didn't really cover this and I'm wondering this, just reach out. Thanks. Have a nice day, everybody.